Hello, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. It's 6:01, and I want to thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Kathy Jones, president of the League of Women Voters of Alabama, and tonight's forum is a collaboration of several nonpartisan organizations, including Alabama Forward, Alabama Values, the Ordinary People Society, or TOPS, the Alabama Civil Liberties Union of Alabama, the Southern Coalition for Social Justice, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, as well as the League of Women Voters of Alabama. Tonight is a very unique opportunity for us to learn about how redistricting impacts the ability of people to make their voices heard, and it addresses many of the longstanding racial inequities and challenges that so many of our Alabama neighbors face, and shows how they can be tied directly to gerrymandering. Tonight's forum is part one of a two-part series, which will prepare us and the community members as well as coalition groups to be able to review and provide inputs to the maps that the reapportionment committee is developing right now and will be presented at the special session when it starts in late October or early November. I heard this afternoon that there's a rumor that we may hear the announcement in the next couple of days. So we're seeking to reach a common understanding around community mapping and what constitutes a fair map. And so this is a good opportunity for us to share our rationales for our proposed maps and to share constraints and hurdles that people faced when they were creating their own maps. It's not an opportunity. We're not here to evaluate each other's maps at this time. But we're also not endorsing maps either. It's just an opportunity to share and to listen. And so what we're trying to do is to give a good example of what a nonpartisan community involvement in Alabama's redistricting process should look like. You'll see that there are several maps developed by non-governmental groups and individuals, and we'll have an opportunity to listen, ask questions. We're going to gain an understanding of what fair maps look like. If you'll place your questions in the Q&A tab, and I wanted to tell you that we're also live streaming this on our LWVAL Facebook page, and that several of the organizations listed here are going to be sharing that Facebook live stream on their Facebook pages as well. So you can share that with your friends and family and help them understand more about redistricting. And I also wanted to point you to the next page, which is the agenda. And if you can go one more slide, this agenda is what we're going to step through during this meeting. And I wanted to introduce our moderator. I guess there's a hand raised. Is there a problem? Do we need to? The volume is really low. I don't know how to turn that up. Can you? All right, is anyone else having trouble hearing?
No, not at all.
Okay.
You're coming through loud.
Okay, sorry, I'm trying not to boom it too close to the microphone, but okay. And I wanted to introduce the moderator for tonight, Dr. Regina M. She's a professor of political science at Alabama State University, and she's a 2002 graduate of ASU, and she earned her master's degree at Montgomery and her doctorate at Auburn University. And it's in that role as a professor of political science that she teaches political science courses, and she always pays homage to her familial roots in Lowndes County, Alabama, which was the original Black Panthers' birthplace. And she focuses on race and gender's influence on policy and women of color's political experience. And I'm proud to hand it off to her, and she's going to carry it on from here. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, and thank you for joining us this evening. We have a very engaging and informative forum planned for this evening. So today you will hear from a range of speakers, and We will start with a brief introduction of our speakers before I hand it over to those speakers. So we will have joining us this evening, Tish Goodall-Fox, Legal Director of the ACLU of Alabama. She will give you an overview of redistricting in Alabama. She will be followed by Tanya Farrell Chestnut, Data and Senior Research Analyst for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. Dr. Farrell Chestnut will speak on map creation, and she will also explain key terms associated with the process. Next, you will hear from Evan Milligan, Executive Director of Alabama Forward. He will give participants information on a fair maps checklist. And then you will hear from Felicia Scalzetti, Crowd Fellow, and Miss Felicia will show the crowd some examples of gerrymandering in Alabama. So before I turn over to our presenters, I would like to go over a few of the guidelines guiding this forum for this evening. We ask that you place all of your questions in the Q&A section located next to the chat icon. We are monitoring this section and we will ask questions during the Q&A portion at the end of this forum. For our viewers watching live on Facebook or YouTube, we will also monitor questions in the comment sections on those platforms as well. For our presenters and speakers, I will give you a prompt when you reach the halfway mark of your allotted time so that you can then begin closing and wrap up your presentations. So at this time, we will turn it over to Tish Falk, Legal Director of the ACLU of Alabama, to hear an overview of redistricting in the state of Alabama.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. And thank you everyone for joining us this evening. Pam, are we back to our next section? Thank you. When it comes to redistricting in Alabama, it's important to understand what the constitutional and statutory guidelines are at the federal level, as well as the statutory planning that the state of Alabama has already issued. Next slide, please. First and foremost, we need to understand that the state of Alabama is obligated to comply with the United States Constitution and Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. I will add here that we also know that the Reapportionment Committee redistricting guidelines are giving us some insights into what the Redistricting Committee anticipates moving forward. They have stated their recognition of both the US Constitution and Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. But our question has to be, what do these two federal mandates require? Next slide, please. First, as it pertains to the constitutional obligations, we are looking both at Article 1 of the Constitution and the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause. In Article 1, Section 2, the Founding Fathers intended for there to be a balance between and among the congressional districts as they were setting forth our governmental structure. While they may have had an under-inclusive definition of person, recall at the time that the Constitution was adopted, a person was only white men and usually only included property owners. We understand now that equal representation for equal numbers of people must be at hand when we're talking about congressional maps. We also know that this requirement has been incorporated as applicable to state legislatures as well. We also understand from the 14th Amendment, which incorporates that one person, one vote theory, that we have to make sure that our districts are equal as far as population, with some tolerance for slight deviations. Next slide, please. As I said, when we're talking about one person, one vote, we need to make sure that race is not the predominant factor as it pertains to to designing our districts. However, we also understand that the United States broadly and Alabama in particular have a history of racial intimidation and discrimination when it comes to voting rights and voting behavior. Because of that, we know that the VRA, the Voting Rights Act, anticipates and provides for a compelling governmental interest in taking race into consideration. We know that there has to be good reasons to think it would be a violation of the Voting Rights Act when our legislature takes race into consideration. Next slide, please. Now, when we're talking about the Voting Rights Act, it's important to understand that this statute promulgated by Congress was intended to address the history and impact of racial discrimination as it pertained to voting. Across the South, following Reconstruction, we saw the best opportunity for the United States to heal as it related to its racist past almost flow away. And up until 1992, it was impossible for a Black candidate to win a congressional seat across much of the South, including Alabama. In 1992, the Voting Rights Act went into action in a way that was intended to provide a means by which we would see the opportunity for Black voters to select candidates of choice under certain circumstances. Please understand that the Voting Rights Act purposefully takes race into consideration when it comes to voting districting if certain preliminary steps are met. And so by definition, the Voting Rights Act takes race into consideration and it uses race to a particular end. That being said, using race does not give free license moving forward to pack Black or other minority voters as tightly as you can into any particular voting district. We understand that Black voters are likely to have the opportunity to select candidates of choice if we know that the district has what we call an effective range or percentage. And that analysis is very, very fact specific. Here in Alabama, we request and require that the reapportionment committee do that balancing as it goes about pulling together our congressional and our state legislative maps. Next slide. So what do we use when it comes to figuring out how and whether the VRA compels the state to take race into consideration as it is constructing voting districts? Well, the United States Supreme Court has unanimously found that the legacy of official discrimination acted in concert with the multi-member districting scheme to impair the ability of cohesive groups of Black voters to participate equally in the political process and to elect candidates of their choice. Therefore, we find ourselves looking at a Supreme Court case, and I'm going to botch the pronunciation of this, Jingles, which provides the preconditions for when we may take race into consideration and how the Voting Rights Act anticipates taking race into consideration as we go about constructing congressional districts. Next slide, please. Pam, next slide. Oh, well, there we go. As we're looking at the test from Jingles, we know that we want to make sure that we have a sufficiently large and geographically compact voting district to constitute a majority in a single member district. A majority in a single member district. Here in Alabama, District 7 meets this requirement or was understood previously to meet this requirement. As we see population shifting across the state, we have a total, a net loss of population on the western side of the state where District 7 is now located. We also have an increase in population over on the northeastern side of the state, such that we anticipate that we are going to need to reconstitute the districts over in that area so that we have equality or near equality of population to satisfy there. We want to make sure that we are dealing with politically cohesive groups of voters and that the majority vote sufficiently as a block to enable it, usually to defeat the minority's preferred candidate. If these conditions are met, we understand that the VRA kicks into effect, and we then have to ask the question of whether we should have this, this majority minority district in place. Here in Alabama, we have one such voting district. The state of South Carolina, my home state, also has one such district. And of course, what we're looking for moving forward is to answer the question of whether the state of Alabama should continue to have a voting rights district. I want to drop here in the chat for everyone a resource developed by the NAACP LDF concerning redistricting and the VRA as it pertains to what you should look for when dealing with questions about fair maps and fair redistricting across the South. It's important that we observe this process and procedure and that we ensure that the state of Alabama is meeting its obligations as it pertains to the Constitution and the Voting Rights Act. I hope that this helps you organize your mind as you're thinking through the process of what we're going to discuss this evening. And I look forward to your questions and comments when we get to that portion of our program. Next slide. Thank you.
Thank you to Tish Falks with the ACLU of Alabama for giving us a very brief introduction to redistricting in the state of Alabama. And we want to thank Tish for highlighting some of the case law relevant to the redistricting process here in the state of Alabama. Next, we will hear from Tanya Farrell Chestnut. And Dr. Farrell Chestnut will give us some information on map creation and also explain some of those key terms involved in the process of creating maps, because I know that many of you who are watching and joining us this evening, you may have questions like, what is cracking? What is packing? What does it mean to crack a district? What does it mean to pack a particular district? What is racial gerrymandering? What is political gerrymandering? And we're hoping that before the end of this forum this evening, you will have better answers to those questions. And we hope that Dr. Farrell Chestnut will begin explaining some of those terms for us. So now we're going to turn over to Dr. Farrell Chestnut.
Thank you very much, Dr. Moore. I so appreciate that warm introduction. And to everyone joining us this evening, welcome and thank you so much for participating. I am Dr. Farrell Chestnut with the Legal Defense Fund, and I am going to share my screen. Okay. And so if someone can give me a thumbs up, I hope everyone can see my screen just fine. All right. So as Dr. Moore indicated, I will be sharing a few terms and also the process that map drawers go through in order to build and create the redistricting plans for legislative districts and local jurisdictions. So I'll discuss preparing for redistricting, step-by-step guide using Data's redistricting as an example for the community. Is a great and useful tool. And as mentioned, some key terms. Okay. So why are maps important? Maps are important because they are a visual tool to illustrate demographic and geographic data that are foundational for redistricting and reapportionment. Demographic data comes from the official full count of the decennial census, which is completed April 1st, every 10 years. Includes the total and voting age populations by race and Hispanic ethnicity for levels of geography as small as the census block. And the American Community Survey's annually updated estimates of citizen voting age population. Geographic data shows the locations of populations within census geography. It includes census blocks, cities, congressional districts, etc. And GIS, as we commonly refer to a geographic information systems, has many tools and functions for managing data, whether it's population data or geographic data, for storing that data, analyzing that data, and then exporting visualizations to communicate patterns, for example. So preparing a redistricting data set. So there are basically 4 steps. And I do want to get a shout out to MALDEF for their help in terms of providing this sort of information during a earlier convening that BLDF hosted. So there are 4 essential steps. Learn your jurisdiction's redistricting rules. 2, gather the data needed to draw a responsible plan. Create the voting tabulation districts or precincts and block level data set. And EDA, which is perhaps a new term or letters that you're not familiar with, and that stands for exploratory data analysis. So as a trained geographer, that is a set of tools that I bring to the redistricting effort. So once you explore the data, understand geographic and population patterns, then you begin the drawing process and you analyze those districts and where population is within those districts. So step 1, jurisdiction rules. So there are no specific rules, but there are redistricting criteria. So as mentioned, there's a constitutional mandate, 1 person, 1 vote. Next, there's a federal legal mandate, the Voting Rights Act. And then thirdly, traditional redistricting criteria, which includes preserving communities of interest, contiguity, compactness, respect for existing artificial and or natural boundaries, respect for existing political boundaries. So those are criteria that every map drawer takes into consideration when they are embarking on this task. Step 2, gathering data. So constitutional mandate, 1 person, 1 vote, requires us to use the decennial census Public Law 94-171, which is the redistricting summary file from the US Census. So the US Census actually provides that file to the public for use in redistricting. The federal legal mandate, meaning the Voting Rights Act, Also requires the use of citizen voting age population, or commonly known as CVAP. So that is data regarding voting age population, those residents 18 years and over by race. Election information or registration, votes cast, and election results are also used. And then public testimony, which can be supported by socioeconomic data. So again, the decennial census PL, redistricting data, summary files are critical in this step. Okay, so part B of this step, gathering data, centers around the traditional redistricting principle. So preserving communities of interest, and that can be done with public testimony, and it can also now be done with mapping. For example, there are applications available such as one application that allows you to actually draw your community, save it, and upload it into a mapping or redistricting software so that it cannot be changed or split. Contiguity. Contiguity refers to the connectedness of districts. So you don't want areas disconnected. So everything must be connected. All parts of the district must be connected. And that's achieved in mapping and GIS software. Compactness, right? So generally how close residents live within a district. That can also be measured and achieved in mapping and GIS software. Same for respecting and the existence of natural boundaries for existence, whether we're talking about rivers and lakes or whether we're talking about significant roadways or transportation hubs. So those can also be acknowledged and represented in mapping and GIS software. In addition to respecting existing political boundaries, which are critical, so we may refer to that as city or local jurisdictions or county jurisdictions, and other considerations, depending on the task, incumbency. And so therefore, joining the addresses to the actual map file or geocoding addresses of elected officials. And also racially polarized voting. And that is important, and we must use election information in order to analyze racially polarized voting. Step 3, merging relevant quantitative data in GIS. So the minimum data set for Jingles 1 compliance, as Tish indicated, is the single block GIS layer with the PL94 redistricting data and ACS, and that's the American Community Survey, citizen voting age population data, and relevant registration and votes cast data. Okay, so that information is needed in order to comply with Jingles 1. So logistics around creating redistricting data sets. So you start with the block geography. So that's the lowest or smallest geographic unit that's perhaps similar to your own neighborhood block. And the PL data from the US Census Bureau. Most data sets are not compatible with the 2020 block census geography and will require some form of disaggregation. So that means pushing the data down to the smaller geographic unit. So that's done in your GIS software using tools available. Please note, according to the US Census, the census will not release its standard 2020 ACS one-year estimate because of the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on data collection. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. So Jingo's questions to establish a Section 2 violation. So is the minority group sufficiently large and geographically compact to make up a majority in a district? So this means greater than 50% of the CVAP. And so that's accomplished by actually computing the ideal population in GIS software. So taking the total population and dividing that by the number of districts that you are responsible for creating. And that will give you an ideal population, and that is what you use to measure whether or not the minority group has at least 50% of existence or residency in that particular district. Is the minority group politically cohesive? And so that means that voters in the group tend to vote in favor of the same candidates and ballot positions, and that's done through racially polarized voting. And so the map drawer is involved in that process by actually creating maps to show where those votes are actually existing within geographic space. So it's a way to visualize that. So in summary, so all of these items represent the totality of circumstances. Does the minority group have less opportunity than other members of the electorate to participate in the election process and to elect representatives of their choice? And so again, that is our first charge as a map drawer for LDF, who is working in redistricting with a racial justice focus. So step 4, again, those letters, exploratory data analysis is what someone like myself does with geographic training. Then we draw and analyze. We load the created block layer in GIS. GIS software used often is Magnitude by Caliber or Esri's ArcGIS, and with other relevant GIS layers that you may find useful, such as housing population or the way housing and segregation patterns may look in a jurisdiction. Okay, drawing a map example using Dave's redistricting. Okay. And so some of you are familiar. I see some examples of maps that have been created on Dave's redistricting. It's a very useful tool. It's open and free to the public. And so there are areas located with numbers that I just want to highlight. So there's where number 1 is located. There is sort of what we call a hamburger, but that if you click on that, that will allow you to navigate. If you've already signed in and created an account, it would allow you then to go to your maps that you created. Okay. Area number 2 on this slide. So I want to just point out that there is a YouTube link, and if you click on that, Dave's Redistricting has some excellent tutorials. All right, so if you're just starting, you haven't created a map, you may then want to pick your state here on the left side, or you may want to select on the map. And if you select a map, then choices will come up, and you can certainly select your favorite state or state that you live in. In this example, I've pointed out where Alabama is. And you also have the choice of current maps here up top, resources or notable maps. And for example, if you would like to explore the best minority representation map that's available to you. Okay, so let's just say that we selected a favorite map, which is the best minority representation map, or otherwise known as Cheese Boys Alabama map. And this is indicating view only, that you don't have yet the capability to actually paint districts. So you'll need to click on that, duplicate the map here indicated by number 3, and then it will allow you to save the map and then bring it in and edit it. But while I'm here, I just want to say that you select your districts here in this left panel, and the panel next to it will show you the district details. And as I mentioned, that ideal population, that is where you will see that information contained. So if you want to create a brand new map, start from scratch, and you want to create a map of your local jurisdiction, for instance, not necessarily a congressional map or state legislative map, but just a map of perhaps your community. And so as I've illustrated, for one, you select new map, you enter your information, and here where it says interstate, that you select that, and then another panel, number 3, will show up, and that is where you select the county or city that your local jurisdiction is located. In this section number 4 here, then you enter the district number, and then that will actually calculate the target population or ideal value. And so this is Jefferson County that I selected. Again, to the left, number 1 are the 5 districts. Number 2 is the district details, where once you begin the process of adding VTDs or blocks, you will actually see in this panel the total population. You can also do add some map layers or overlays, and in this case, I added a background map, district lines, landmarks, and also all minorities, and you will see that here listed in this next example. And this is also an example where I've actually selected the painting tool and painted a local area to begin building District 2. Okay, so thank you so much. Yeah, we'll be happy to answer questions, and I hope that's been informative. I'm sorry.
Thank you so much, Dr. Farrell Chestnut. And I want to remind our viewers, if you have questions, please make sure that you place those questions. If you're joining us via Zoom, place those questions in the Q&A section here on Zoom. If you're watching us via social media, you can use the comment section on Facebook or YouTube to also place your questions. And we're going to collect those questions and we'll address those questions at the end of this event. Also, I want to remind our viewers that if you are registered for this event, there will be a post-event packet that will be emailed to you using the email address that you used to register for this event. We know that there's a lot of information being shared, and so we want you to have access to the information that's being shared, including these key terms that were shared in the presentation. Also, as a reminder, since this event is being streamed via Facebook Live, the video will be available for viewing on the Alabama League of Women Voters Facebook page. All right, so next we will have Evan Milligan, Executive Director of Alabama Forward, and he will come and give us some information to explain to us what would actually constitute a fair map. So at this time, we're going to turn it over to Evan Milligan.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Dr. Moore. Thank you again to all the co-sponsor groups, especially the League of Women Voters of Alabama and Alabama Values. And Alabama Values for the deep organizing that you did to make tonight possible. Thank you, Tish and Tanya, for making my contribution pretty simple. I want to talk to you a little bit about our Fair Maps checklist. I won't read it to you. I thought I'd say a little bit about why we thought it would be helpful to share it with you. As Dr. Moore just said, I'm the Executive Director of Alabama Forward, a coalition of civic groups working to make sure that Alabama's democratic systems are accessible to all Alabamians. And for the member groups and staff of Alabama Forward, democracy is important to us. We want more of it, a lot of it. And one of the amazing ideals most of us hopefully share in a democracy is that people with very passionate and different beliefs can coexist and agree to basic minimum standards and principles, to set a floor beneath which we refuse to allow anyone in our society to sink. In our coalition of co-sponsors and advocates who've been meeting twice a month since the early part of the summer, we have people who feel and care very deeply about fairness, race equity, transparency, following the rule of law, adequate representation, and other principles. Though most of us would say we share those values, at times our definitions and manifestation of the values might vary widely. And that diversity is certainly reflected in map making. We are attempting to journey together in a forward direction, but there are differing opinions on how to arrive at that destination. So tonight you will see maps that reflect that diversity. However, there are fundamental places where we agree. We agree that we don't want to go backwards and revisit the failures of our state's past. We attempted to produce a simple list that sets a minimum floor we hope maps will meet if we are to consider them fair maps. We hope that you will use this checklist and other resources shared tonight to help inform your consideration of the maps that you'll hear more about. Please ask questions, take notes, think about the rationales that the presenters offer for their maps, and come into this process expecting to learn something new. We appreciate your time tonight and hope that this checklist can be helpful to you. Again, I said I won't read it, but I just wanted to note that many of those terms that Tish and Tanya just reviewed and maybe even introduced for some of the folks that are listening tonight, you'll see them here. There's one side of the list basically mirrors the other side. One side is applicable to the legislative maps, so state, Senate, state, House. The other side is applicable to the congressional maps. And then beneath here, we have some more definition, summarized language, as well as footnotes that can give you the link, the source that we're relying on for this language and for the definitions we're using for these terms. So you've heard the previous speakers define them and talk about them. We just wanted to give you a helpful tool that you can use as you listen further tonight. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you so much, Evan, for giving us an overview of what to expect and how to evaluate maps and to determine whether or not the maps constitute some values of fairness. So we definitely appreciate you sharing that fair map checklist with us, and we appreciate you providing an overview for us. So next we will hear from Felicia Scalzetti. Felicia Scalzetti is a Crowd Fellow, and Felicia will show the crowd some examples of gerrymandering here in Alabama. So Felicia will go through some maps and explain how these maps constitute gerrymandering and explain a little bit more in detail about what gerrymandering actually is. So I'll turn it over now to Felicia.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Can everybody see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just going to walk us through about one or two examples per statewide map, just so that y'all can see what this looks like in our own backyard. So people may or may not be familiar with Congressional District 7. This is Terry Sewell's district. This is our majority minority district, and this is probably the district that you know most well if you know anything about gerrymandering in Alabama. So we'll hit this really briefly, but there's another district I want to talk about as well. So when we look at District 7, it is obviously a little funny shaped. I actually live in this little appendage up here, which separates me geographically from the rest of my district. This is the compactness factor that Evan was talking about in the checklist. How mostly spheroid or square shaped is your district, or how sort of stretched out is it like an octopus? That isn't bad in and of itself. It's not great, but it's not bad. But what happens is that if we look at where Black Alabamians live in this state, you can see that we've packed a lot of them into this district. The darker these areas are on the map, the more Black people over the age of 18 live there. This does not mean that they're voters, just that they're a population above 18. The reason we care about this when we talk about majority minority districts is because we want people to actually be able to vote in their candidate of choice. Otherwise, when you talk about district sizes, you're talking about total population, whether people can vote or not, whether they are over the age of 18 or not. So when we look at District 7, I'm sorry, this is going to be a lot of numbers, but I promise you I will walk you through it. When we look at District 7, it's down here, okay? We can see that this district is 60% Black people over the age of 18. we have 25.9% Black population over the age of 18 in Alabama in total. Now, if you want a majority minority district, you want that number to be at least 50 plus one, probably a little bit more just to be on the safe side. So we're trending kind of on the higher side there, which isn't great. There are a lot of things that you can say pro or against that. We will get into those later. But for example, you can see here in Birmingham that this little finger comes up to grab everybody there, right? Now, there's another district I want to talk about because, like I said, almost anybody who talks about gerrymandering in Alabama is going to talk about District 7. Let's talk about Montgomery. So Montgomery has 3 different congressional districts. This poor town has been split into 3 different parts, and you can live on the same road. This is probably less than a mile apart, and you can hop through 3 different congressional districts just based on where you're at here. So why? Why is Montgomery split into 3 places? Well, let's see if we can tell based on where Black Alabamians are living. And no surprise, that is in fact what seems to be going on here. I'm sorry, I know there are a bit of lines going on, but if you can tell, these darker black lines right here, these are the outlines of those districts. So I'm going to turn the map color back on. So you see that? You can follow that with your eyes. I'm going to turn this off. So see how this district right here, which is District 7, is grabbing all the Black people that are on the west side of Montgomery. This district up here is grabbing people right over here. And then District, what is that, 4 over there? I always get confused when I turn the colors off, is grabbing people over here. So this is an example of cracking. We've taken this population, we've split them into 3 pieces. So this is not something that only happens on the congressional map. And like I said, you might have only seen a congressional map before, but the statewide maps, there's actually 4 different types of maps that we're going to be talking about. There is the congressional map, which is the one you just saw. There's also the state Senate map, the state House map, and the State Board of Education map. I'm going to show you examples from 2 more of those. So this is the Alabama State Senate map, and I'm going to talk about Huntsville for a moment. So in Alabama, as a general rule, we do not have competitive districts. That means that if a district is Democratic, it's very, very Democratic. And if it's Republican, it's very, very Republican. Extremely safe seats on both sides. There are only a handful of competitive districts, and these are 2 of them. There are, in fact, the only 2 competitive districts in the Alabama State Senate. So 2 out of 35 districts could reasonably go to either party. They both lean Republican. All competitive districts in Alabama lean Republican. And what is going on here is exactly what we just saw in Montgomery. They are being cracked. You see here, the Black population that lives around in Huntsville mostly lives in this area, and they've been split surgically into these 3 different piles, into these 3 different districts. So into 2, into District 1, and District 7. But what's happened is that there are so many Democratic voters and there's so many Black voters that even when you split them, even when you crack them, these districts still end up being competitive. This should actually probably be 2 Dem districts if you didn't have this piece of District 1 coming over. And let's look at where District 1 is at. District 1 starts all the way over here, crosses multiple counties, goes to Athens, and then dodges right around to grab that top part right there. That's not representing those communities very well. Something else you should know about when you're looking at maps is that this is why your expertise about your local community is very important. Because as you can see, if you're looking at a map from a bird's eye view like this, you wouldn't know that there's a mountain right here. I didn't know there was a mountain right here for a very long time because I talked to somebody who lives in here in this neighborhood. They have to drive up to Huntsville, turn around, and then come all the way down to get to Albertville, which is where their representative holds their town halls. It's a 2-hour trip for them. So knowing about geographic barriers, that's where your expertise as somebody who lives in your community is very important because we can't always see those things, and if we're not looking for them, it can get thrown aside very quickly. So one other district I'm going to talk about real quickly, and then we'll look at the House. All right, so this is just to reorient yourselves, but we're looking at outside of Birmingham. Specifically, this is St. Clair County, and this is Shelby down here. And here's Talladega right in the middle. Now, If you live in Talladega, if you've ever been to Talladega, you might recognize that this is splitting the city of Talladega right down the middle. And you might have noticed on that checklist that respecting municipal boundaries or respecting jurisdiction boundaries is on there. And yet this map doesn't do that. It cuts Talladega right in half. The city of Talladega extends all the way down here. Why? Why do they do that? Look how precise that is to cut people out. So what you now have is this district, District 15. This is Jefferson County over here. This is actually parts of Metro Birmingham. The city of Birmingham limits, goes all the way out to Talladega and grabs these people here. This district that starts in St. Clair dodges right around them, like you're going under, limbo or something like that, to grab people here. This is also a really good example of gerrymandering that hurts everybody. These places are likely going to be Republican no matter what, and yet this representative, the senator, always introduces himself as a senator from St. Clair. That's correct. He is the senator from St. Clair. He's also the senator for South Shelby, but he never mentions them. It seems that he has forgotten that his district goes anywhere past here. Having your representatives be responsive to you is dependent on how these lines are drawn. We're going to look at one other example on the State House of something that is not so clear-cut, not so easy. All right, we're going to look at Anniston and Talladega again. Talladega has the incredible misfortune of being split down the middle in every single map. It is something that I know there are people on this call who organize in Talladega and can talk about how that has harmed the community. I'm going to talk about, this is a nuance one, where it's not so easy to tell you what is the right thing to do and what isn't. So this is House District 32. And you look at it, it kind of looks like a funny shape, right? I don't know. I haven't come up with a name for this. Maybe like a crane or something. Maybe like, like, I don't know what those things are called, the construction vehicles that like have like the big scoop on the front. I don't know. Something. I'm sure somebody can come up with something. Maybe an angry goose mid-flight. But what this district is doing is that this district is actually a majority-minority district, and it's connecting the people who live in Talladega with Black Alabamians in Anniston and a little bit of Oxford. In this case, this district is drawn this way not to pack voters, but to actually give them a voice. This district is only 50.1% Black voting age population. Talladega testified at their public hearings, as is their right, that they wanted to be kept whole. Talladega and this district in general has lost people since the last redistricting cycle, and they actually need to expand their boundaries by about 2,000 people to come up to that one person, one vote, to make sure the districts are all roughly equal. Since they're only 50.1% Black voting age population, that means they're going to lose their majority minority status. Probably no matter what, but definitely if you include all of Alabama. And so this is what I mean about nuance. This is a case where, people who live here may not actually feel like Anniston's part of their community, or maybe they do. That's why it's important for people who live in that community to speak up about what they want to see and how they want their communities represented. You also have to consider, is this district drawn this way? Is it empowering people? Is it empowering minority voters? Is it empowering both communities? Or is the fact that Talladega gets split at every single level of map, is that hurting the community more than having a majority minority district is helping? There are no easy answers to that. And that's why having a forum like this is so important, so that y'all can see what these different difficulties are, what these different nuances are, and what the balance is, and how fair maps really have to be community driven.
Thank you so much, Felicia, for that very impactful presentation. I do want to remind our audience, if you have questions, make sure that you're placing your questions in the Q&A section here on Zoom or in the comment section on social media. So now that you've heard and received information about the history of redistricting, you know what constitutes a fair map, you've seen examples of gerrymandering here in the state of Alabama, and you've also heard an explanation of key terms as they relate to redistricting in the redistricting process. We will now move to the portion of the forum where we will have an opportunity to view maps created by community mappers and learn about the process and rationale driving the creation of these maps. Each community mapper will present their map, and we will ask each mapper to answer a few questions as you're going through your presentation. We want to know, what was your strategic approach to creating your map? What were your priorities around the strategies in creating your map? And what were the hurdles? For example, did you have to lower some of the requirements to achieve certain priorities? So we will begin with our community mappers, and we will again ask our audience to put your questions in the Q&A section if you're joining us via Zoom, in the comment section if you're watching us via social media. And we do ask that our community mappers that we want to mind the time so that we do have time to address the questions from our audience. So take about 10 minutes or less to go through your maps. So we will begin with our community mappers. We will begin with Deandra Zimmerman first. Deandra will present a whole county approach to congressional mapping. So at this time, we'll turn over to Deandra.
Thank you, Dr. Moorer. I think we have an unusual position in that, and again, my name is Deandra DeBruyne Zimmerman. We actually have litigation pending on the issue, and I'll touch on that, as well as our proposal, which is a whole county map. I think all of the presenter, Ms. Folks and Dr. Farrell Chestnut and everyone else has done an amazing job of setting the stage. But in discussing the whole map, and as a lawyer who's litigating the case, in addition to some other lawyers, I would love to touch on just some Supreme Court rules of the road in terms of how we frame the map and why we frame the map. And one of those, which you've heard a lot about, is the restrictions on racial gerrymandering. And you really can't racially gerrymander unless you establish three things, which has been discussed ad nauseum. And the first is that the minority group is large enough and in the same geographic area. And the second, that the minority group is politically cohesive. And the third, which is really important as we look at the map that we created, is that the district's majority white vote is a block to a minority candidate, okay? And that is a really important piece, which I will get into the litigation as we talk about why we're proposing a different map from that which was created as part of the 2011 congressional map. So if you look at the 2011 congressional map, it kind of looks like a salamander, right? Which is part of where gerrymander, the word, comes from. The 7th district has a long arm reaching from Tuscaloosa into Birmingham, dropping down below Selma, and a finger reaching back up into Montgomery. And I think the prior speaker really spoke to the real life racial reasons why that occurred. And that really is about voter dissolution and preventing one person and one vote. And so a lot of the litigation that we're engaged in at that time, in this time, and I will get into that in a moment, has to do with correcting the racial gerrymandering that is part of the 2011 congressional map. And the second thing justifying that the 2021 whole map that I'll go into in a moment is traditional congressional principles about keeping the counties together in a very natural way. And some of the 1991 guidelines that were adopted by the legislature's reapportionment committee spoke specifically to that and spoke about how the preservation of county boundaries deters that sort of racial gerrymandering. So you're not cutting up counties to block Black folk, quite candidly, from getting the candidates of that choice, but you are making sure that it's one person, one vote, and it is in line with constitutional principles. So ultimately, our plan is about drawing a 7-district congressional plan that doesn't split a county and has minor population deviations. And you've heard about some of that earlier today. So in the Black Belt District 7, there would be 0.11% above ideal population and about 49.9% Black registered voters. And we'll get into what that means in terms of some of the challenges that we have moving forward with this map, which I know Dr. Moorer asked us to address. And the second piece is there would be a Jefferson Bibb Perry Hale district that would be 0.36% above ideal population. What's also really important, I think, about our whole county congressional map proposal is it would ensure 2 Black opportunity districts, which I think is crucial for the future of the state and will allow citizens to elect candidates of their choice without voter dissolution and other problematic practices. The whole county plan is in line with the Constitution. You heard both about the Equal Protection Clause and you heard about Article 1, Section 2. And in light of some of the Supreme Court decisions I'll discuss, the whole county congressional plan is in line with those constitutional mandates. And again, it is in line with what was prior the tradition of Alabama maintaining whole counties until they were split to really address racial gerrymandering. And so in line with that, a number of lawyers, Jim Blacksher, Ed Still, who've been in this space for a long time, Joe Watley and Henry Quillen, Myron Penn, and my firm filed an action in the Northern District of Alabama asking for a 3-judge panel. And speaking specifically to the current congressional map that split 7 counties, you heard about that discussion earlier today. Those counties were Clark, Montgomery. Montgomery, as you heard, is split amongst 3 districts: Cherokee, Blount, Tuscaloosa, Jackson, and Jefferson. And Ms. Scalzetti did a great job of talking about that split. And it also placed a lot of Black voters heavily in one majority district and minimized the influence of Black voters in about 5 majority white districts. And so our plaintiffs, Mr. Zimmerman and Mr. Billingsley from District 7 and District 6, where we assert that the gerrymandering, the purpose of the gerrymandering is to split Black and white voters, have come forward and sued the Secretary of State because ultimately he's the chief elections officer in this state, and have asserted a number of claims that have to do with malapportionment and racial gerrymandering that we believe the 2021 whole county congressional map addresses. We've asked for a 3-judge panel, a deck judgment that the 2011 congressional map is unconstitutional. And we've asked for the court to give the Alabama legislature a reasonable opportunity to enact a constitutional plan, a fair plan, as we've heard that term said many times tonight, in time for the 2022 primary election. So we felt pretty confident moving forward that this plan would create 2 Black opportunity districts, was in line constitutionally, and also was in line with Alabama jurisprudence and former political tradition of maintaining whole counties. Probably one challenge we faced is maybe an argument that the majority Black district that you've heard about is justified by the Voter Rights Act. And, you know, in addition to the Gingell or Gingell, everybody says the name different case, is the Cooper versus Harris 2017 case, which squarely addressed whether you had to have Black voting, if you didn't have a Black voting, what's called a BVAP district over 50%, was it a violation of the Voters' Rights Act? And what you've heard tonight is there are 3 conditions to that, and most relevant to our discussion in terms of addressing the whole county plan is the 3rd criteria of the Supreme Court in the Cooper case and the Gingell case, saying that the district's white majority must sufficiently vote as a block to defeat the minority's preferred candidate. And I think looking at the last data that has to do with the 2 districts in question 7 and 5, as it relates to the Biden results, that in truth, we have a white crossover vote that prevents that argument from being sustained, that not having that Black majority district would indeed violate the Voters Protection Act. And so that would not be an unconstitutional gerrymander that would be prohibitive to our whole county congressional map proposal. At the end of the day, it's our belief that this is the fairest map we could have under the current condition, and that it is in line with constitutional principles, Alabama principles, and that it's the best map for the people of the state of Alabama. I'd like to thank everybody for being here today. I see there's over 104 participants. Probably nothing is more important to being an American and preserving our principles than protecting one person, one vote. So I thank everybody for your time, and I'm very happy to answer any questions that you may have at the end of all of the panelists speaking. Thank you for your time.
Thank you to Deandra for her presentation. And we want to move to our next presenter, Tabitha Eisner. And Tabitha Eisner will present a community member congressional map. I do want to remind our presenters of their time, as well as the 3 questions that we want you to address or touch on as you do your presentation. What was your strategic approach to creating your map? What were your priorities around creating your map, and what were the hurdles that you had to overcome or address while creating your map? So again, Tabitha Eisner with her presentation from the perspective of a community member.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. I think that someone's going to put up my map on the screen. Is that right? Or do you need me to do it? Oh, thanks, Kim. So my name is Tabitha Eisner, and I am a community member. I live in Montgomery. I live in the narrow slice of Montgomery that is currently part of District 2. And just, a mile to my west is District 7, and a mile to my east is District 3. So I know well about how it stinks to be living in a place that is split up by these congressional districts. So I want to introduce you to my proposed map. My strategy was to draw a map that would be fairer than the current congressional map, while also being politically feasible. So specifically, I wanted to draw a map that could be realistically adopted by the Alabama State Legislature. And I am perhaps cynical about what they would be willing to approve. I know that we have the opportunity to do lawsuits after the maps, now, as League of Women Voters has shown, and also after the maps have been released. But I wanted to see what I thought I could create that might stand a chance of getting passed through the legislature. So my priorities around that strategy, so top thing was to make it fairer, and the second thing was to make it politically feasible. So in order to make it fairer, I wanted to keep one district that was at least 50% Black voting age population, but did not go well over that, did not become so packed with Black voters that the Black voting power was being diluted. I wanted as many other districts in our state to be competitive as possible. So that was true. Anytime I approached a map, I wanted to see more competitive districts. Right now in Alabama, only 4% of seats in the Alabama State Legislature are competitive, and none of the congressional seats are competitive. Competitive meaning that they are, that vote totals come in between 45 and 55%. So a relatively even split where a Democrat or a Republican could win. So with so little competition right now, I think that's hurting our democracy. And so my top priority was to make as many districts competitive as possible. And thirdly, so the second half of my strategy was to make it politically feasible. And so I really focused in on the requirements that the state's legislative committee on redistricting, the reapportionment committee, had laid out. And I tried to take very seriously the priorities that they named for themselves and make sure that my map didn't violate those priorities in a way that they would have an easy excuse for throwing my map out the window. So I'll talk a little bit about that in just a moment. The third question that I was asked to respond to was about what hurdles or challenges I faced in making my map. So I did try to keep communities whole. I think that is important, but I didn't make whole counties a top priority. Based on what I've seen the legislature do in the past, it didn't seem to me like that was something that the legislature was going to prioritize. And so I didn't prioritize it in trying to make a map that I thought the legislature would go for. I was also significantly limited by the requirement that incumbents be protected. So the state legislature insists that incumbents should not be placed in contests against each other. So it needed to make sure that each district had one and only one current member of Congress in it. And that does limit the amount of flexibility you have. Lastly, the Alabama Reapportionment Committee has stated that it's important to them to keep the core, to preserve the core of existing districts. And so that was certainly a challenge. What they mean by that is that they want the map to look recognizably similar to the map that existed previously. So it should be clear which district is District 1, which district is District 2. It should be in about the same place that it was before. So taking that requirement seriously also significantly limited the options for making changes to the map. Okay, so of course, I had to comply with the Federal Voting Rights Act. And I would argue that this map does. It complies with Section 2 by creating a majority Black district. District 7 here, represented by Terry Sewell, would be 51% Black voting age population. Then there would be an additional district, District 2, would have a significant minority population that would not reach the threshold of 50% Black voting age population. Also paid careful attention to the one person, one vote principle because I knew that the state committee had repeatedly said in their public hearings that they believed that congressional districts needed to be the same size down to one person. So really getting a match on population numbers from district to district. So I worked hard to minimize that population deviation. Also complied with the requirement of compactness. Maybe not the best strength of this map. It is hard to draw compact districts, but compact enough. District 1 probably being the least compact, and District 6 also kind of being in that range. It's a long drive to drive through all of District 1. So that is a drawback to my map. All districts in my map are contiguous. So you'll recall that on the checklist, it said that districts need to be contiguous, meaning that they need to be connected to one another. And so all of the districts are contiguous. The district, my map does emphasize preserving communities of interest. So recognizing in particular, the Black Belt as a community of interest, and recognizing that in the old map, in the map that we're living under right now, it really dishonors the Black Belt community of interest by splitting the community down the middle and separating out parts of the Black Belt into District 7, District 2, and District 3. And so I wanted to make sure that as much as possible, the Black Belt would not be separated in that way. And recognizing that the coastal communities represent a particular community of interest with particular economic concerns. I drew District 1 there at the southern edge of the state to represent that coastal community and with a shared economic interest and infrastructure interest. So, and of course, as a Montgomeryan, I have to say, I kept Montgomery in one district, also kept Tuscaloosa County in one district. I know that's been very frustrating for Tuscaloosa County as well. There is still some, it doesn't keep all of Birmingham together. There are some divisions within Gadsden. but tried to minimize the extent to which communities were being broken up. So let's take a look now at the statistics on the next slide. All right. You can see here that this map creates, it retains District 7 as a majority minority district, which is 51% Black voting age population and 57% minority. There is not a second majority minority district, but there are two districts that become competitive. District 2 has a 40%, 39.5% Black voting age population and a 47% minority voting age population, resulting in a competitive district in District 2, which is the eastern part of the Black Belt. And then District 6, which is the area around Birmingham, becomes also a competitive district without a significant minority population, well, a significant minority population, but not approaching a majority minority district. I think we can go back, let's go back to the map. One thing that the state reps kept saying when they were doing the public input process, they kept emphasizing that this is an intensely political process. It is carried out, they believe it's best that it be carried out by elected representatives of the people. So they argued heavily for keeping this as a political process. And I think to a certain extent, that is them saying to the victor goes the spoils. If they have won elections, then they get to control this process. And I don't agree with that value system, but recognizing that my priority was to create something that that legislative committee couldn't object to, I wanted to take that very seriously and recognize that they would see this as a political process and expect for it to have political consequences. You'll see as well that it does retain the core of the districts. There's interest up in northern Alabama in maybe shifting Mo Brooks's district to be more to the eastern side of the state and not extend as far as Lauderdale County. But for the sake of preserving the core of existing districts, I left that as it is. If you are looking for a map that the legislature maybe could tolerate, that's what I hope I've created. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Tabitha, for presenting your map and presenting a map from the perspective of a community member. So next we will hear from Stuart Nafe, manager of the redistricting project for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. And Stuart will share the NAACP Legal Defense Fund map. Stuart.
Thank you, Dr. Moore, and thanks to the League for organizing this and for having me on. And someone's gonna put up a map. Thank you, Kim. Okay, so this is basically two alternative maps that we put together. So our strategic approach was to create two majority Black districts. That is the first prerequisite to a successful Voting Rights Act claim were someone to want to challenge whatever map the legislature ultimately does adopt, which likely will not have two majority Black districts or even two competitive districts. So we wanted to show that it was possible to create two majority Black districts as, sort of a way of just throwing down the gauntlet and saying, it could be litigated if one were interested. So with that ultimate goal in mind, our priorities were to minimize splitting counties, and I'll talk a little bit about what we did on that front, and preserving communities, and in particular keeping Montgomery together, keeping the core of District 7 together, Representative Sewell's district, which has historically contained both Selma and Birmingham, and then making the districts as compact as possible within those parameters. So I did not succeed in keeping all the incumbents in their current districts, so that, I can see that being a political problem, but for Voting Rights Act purposes, we were not prioritizing that. So the two maps that we created, the one on the left splits Jefferson County in between two districts, and the one on the right splits it between three. One on the right is more compact under measures of compactness, because District 6 does not wrap around Birmingham. It's more of a regular sort of rectangular or trapezoidal shape. In the map on the left, it wraps around Birmingham kind of the way it currently does on the existing congressional map. Whether you think one or the other of those is better may depend on your perspective. It may depend on where you live, whether you feel that the northern part of Jefferson County has more in common with the rest of District 6, or maybe has more in common with folks in District 4. So in terms of the hurdles, and then, the other priority that I had was trying to draw districts that were as equal in population size as possible. So this comes close. It's not exactly equal down to the person, but with a little bit of refining, it probably could be made perfectly equal. So in terms of the hurdles, it was a hurdle to get the population equal. It required splitting more counties, both getting the population equal while also creating two majority and minority districts meant splitting more counties than we had wanted to split. So this does split about 12 counties. We minimized the split, so we don't have, other than the Birmingham piece, we don't have counties that are split more than once. So we don't have counties split three ways, except for Jefferson County in the map on the right. We don't have counties that are split, where different pieces of the county are pulled off into a different district, even though it may only be one other district that they're made part of. In some maps, you'll see, one district reaching in from different sides into the same county. We avoided that. But that was also a challenge in certain cases. And then obviously it was a challenge to preserve incumbents, and we did not succeed in that. We did succeed in creating the two majority Black districts. And if we can look at the next slide, we can see the demographics of these districts. So you can see the total population, they're very close. The deviation in percentage terms is 0.07%. And as I said, we think it could probably be brought down a little more with some refining down at a sort of more granular level of map drawing. I am not a demographer by trade, but I did become very addicted to playing with the mapping tools and spent way more time on this than is probably advisable. But it is a lot of fun, and everyone should draw a map. We need to hear from folks, and it's a lot of fun. So you can see that the BVAP is the Black voting age population. District 2 is 50.2% BVAP, and District 7 is 52% BVAP. So it demonstrates that, as required by the first requirement in Jingles, there are two majority Black districts can be drawn. And that was our primary goal in drawing this map. And so that's yes, and yes, that means that both of those two districts would comply, or would mean, it allows us to make the argument that that the Voting Rights Act requires that the state draw two districts, two majority Black districts, which is actually more in line with the Black population in the state as a whole. The Constitution and the Voting Rights Act don't require proportional representation in any legislative body, but courts do tend to look at that. And if you're asking to create, majority Black districts that far exceed the Black population in the jurisdiction as a whole, they may be reluctant to do that. But 2 districts out of 7 is roughly in line to the population that identifies either wholly or partly as Black. And that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. And we will hear from 2 more of our community mappers. And I just want to remind our presenters as they're preparing to come up, as you present, please make sure that you highlight what was your strategic approach to creating your map, what were your priorities around the strategy in creating your map, and also address what were the hurdles or obstacles that you had to address or overcome in creating your map. I also want to remind our viewers that if you have questions, please place those in the Q&A section. If you're joining us via Zoom, if you're joining us via social media, use the comment section on the social media platform to present your questions. Our next presenter is Mike Miller. Mike will be presenting a congressional map, and he's presenting on behalf of the Alabama Election Protection Network. So Mike, take it away.
Hi, thank you. I guess I'll start by sharing my screen here with everyone. Okay, can y'all see my screen now? All right. What we're looking at here is, in this particular map, what we chose to do was, the main strategy was simple. Our approach was simple. We were drawing a map that was simple yet complex, trying to answer the question of the first one based on the 2020 census data. We learned that Blacks make up 27.2% of the state. But currently, we only occupy 14% of the congressional seats. So that's 1 out of 7. So in order to bring us in line with that 27.2% of the total population, and more importantly, 25.9% of the voting age population, we needed to have an additional district. So what I did in order to start looking at this, and it took several tries, like Stuart, I, on one attempt, working with my group, we created a map that kind of split Jefferson County into 3 places, but I won't show you that one. I'll just only go over this one. And the complex part of this is simply because Blacks are spread throughout the county, throughout the state. We have 4 or 5 major centers for where large amounts of Blacks are living, and that's Madison County, Jefferson County, and Tuscaloosa, Montgomery, and then Mobile. Now, that's not discounting the Black Belt, but in a lot of the Black Belt counties, you may have populations of 8 to 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 in a county. So that means you have to string a lot of counties together, and we're still trying to create that ideal district. So in this case, we were working with looking for that second district. So as you look at the map, this map took into account the current representatives, but I did break one of the cardinal rules, but this was a refinement. As you look down here at the bottom, you can see I put current representative for Jerry Carl. I put him in a competition with the current District 2, Barry Moore. And the reason why I did that, it's easy. I can easily put him back in the Congressional District 1. But I chose not to because I wanted to give him a fair chance, because since I'm petitioning for, with this map, we're petitioning for an additional minority seat. I didn't want to just run him out of Congress. I wanted to give him a chance to compete so he could have a seat. Because if I put him in the Congressional District 1, the newly drawn Congressional District 1 proposed, then he would not have a chance as a Republican to maintain that seat. And I didn't want to have that be a major sticking point. But if you'll see here in our map, we took and we split 6 counties. And those 6 counties are Mobile, Russell, Elmore, Morgan, Jefferson County, and Tuscaloosa. So we split those counties only once. And what I did, the first approach we took was looking at the current District 7. So for District 7, we went in and gave more of more of Jefferson County. So it's not just a finger anymore. We went in and gave more of Jefferson County to the District 7. We came across Tuscaloosa, took a little more of Tuscaloosa, took Pickens County whole, Greene County whole, Sumter, Marengo, Dallas, Perry, and we didn't go any further. So we took whole counties with the exception of Jefferson and Tuscaloosa for District 7. And then that left us free to go down to the bottom and go into Mobile County. So we went into Mobile County here. And in going into Mobile County, we took that large concentration of blacks and we paired them with Washington, Choctaw, Clark, Monroe, Wilcox, Lowndes, all of Montgomery, Macon, and Bullock. So in that district, we only split 1 county, and that was Mobile County. So the same thing in District 2. In District 2, we split 2 counties. We split Mobile County and we split Russell County, taking a few there to help make the population. And in District 3 over here, with Representative Rogers, we took and we split, like I said, we split Elmore and Russell in that district. Everything else is whole counties. And then we went up to Mo Brooks, this district up here, District 5, and we only split 1 county, and that's Morgan County. And we took a little bit of Morgan County and gave it to Adderholt in District 4. And the reason for that is so we can make the district as close as possible. And we think that this is a compact and tight enough district that it makes it easy to defend. And if you look at the particulars in the district, you'll see that the stats on this, we have District 7 here, and then the new District 1 with Democrat leaning, and that was not a major focus for us. We were simply trying to create a second minority district or black district, or get as close to a black district with a white population that identified and would vote for the minority or black candidate. And in this case, you see District 7 has a voting age population of 52% black, and in District 1 is 46.54% black, and the total minority in there is 53% in District 1 and 59.77 in District 7. And if you'll see over here on the notes in here, it gives you a little bit of notes. Our districts are within tolerance, and 0.65% population deviation is within the 0.75% threshold that's been tolerated by the courts. There are, like I said, 2 minority districts, and then just going in and analyzing that, you'll see that when it comes to the requirements that we're looking at on completeness of the district, contiguous, free of holes, equal population, splitting. So as you come down, you can see the ratings on those. Proportionality. You'll see the ranking that we have in terms of proportionality, and also you'll have the competitiveness. And excuse me, 1 second. Hey, turn that off. Turn it off. Turn it off. Turn it off. And I'm sorry, I apologize. Cleaning crew. Again, we're looking at competitiveness. Of course, the district is not competitive because we built the district to be a district that favored the minority population. And as you go down, you can see the minority representation of the voting age population. You'll see that we have 2 minority black districts in here with populations of over 45, in the 45 to 50% range, and then 50 to 55% range on a second district. You'll look at the rating. in that area and the compactness. And the main thing that I wanted to stress is what were our priorities around this? It was to create that second minority district. And in order to create that second minority district, we had to go in and make sure that we kept District 7, which was traditionally an African-American district, but we had to look through the rest of the state. And after several attempts at it, we felt like this was the best map that we could present. And we have some legislative sponsors that will be carrying the map to the legislature. We're looking to hopefully have over 10 that will jump on board, but we've got 2 to 3 right now that will initially sponsor the bill and get it sponsor it and have it before the legislature. And let's see, what were the hurdles? What hurdles did we lower or requirements? The major hurdle is that blacks are spread throughout the state. So we had that hurdle. So of course our districts weren't going to be whole county contiguous. And any plan that did not take into account the black population did the black population a disservice in terms of not giving us a second district. I understand that we have districts that can be competitive, but competitive is only as good as the number of people that you have in that district that would vote at any one time. So again, we look at the voting turnout, the past voting turnout, in order to be predictive of the future. And so when we're doing these districts, we were doing them with that in mind. And that is how this particular district came about. And one major thing, we split counties, we did not split precincts. So that means we didn't go down to the block data. We stayed at the precinct level in terms of keeping current precincts as whole. Now, if some of those counties change beforehand, change after this, we had no idea of that. But at this particular point, we are pleased with this particular map, and I look forward to any questions. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael, for your presentation. And our final community map presentation will come from Kadita Stone. Kadita is a Crowd Fellow at Alabama Forward, and Kadita will present a collection of state maps. So Kadita.
Hey everyone, thanks to Legal Women Voters for hosting this amazing event. Super excited to be here. So it's one map with 4 different snapshots. I'm gonna wait for Cam to bring it up. So while she's doing that, I'm going to, is that the first? Okay, that's the first picture. So this is a house map, and just some background information. There are 105 districts, and each of those districts require 47,850 people in them. So just trying to break down each individual 105 districts would definitely be all night. So I just want to highlight some districts that I did. And the first question to answer, my strategy in these maps were definitely to preserve communities of interest, very on point to what everyone was saying tonight, just preserving those communities of interest and not splitting political subdivisions was my main strategy. I wanted to minimize those splits as much as possible. That doesn't mean that they happen in every single district, but for the most part, I made sure that I did not split communities. So I'm gonna give you examples from each of these photos. So in photo 1, if you look at District 1, Florence, Alabama, was previously split in 3 ways, and in my map, I made it into 1 district. District 11 has split Garden City and Huntsville, and in mine, I put both cities in District 12. In District 32, which is the Talladega area that Felicia spoke about. I'm going to get to that at the end. Could you go to the next photo? So in photo 2, in District 49, it's a small part of Centralville that was split, and I added the rest of that in District 49. Moundville, Alabama was in District 72, but no, it was in District 62, but mine is in District 72. Also in Montevallo, District 44. That had been split 3 different ways, and in my map, I had only split it in 2 ways. It was an increase in population in that area, so it wasn't feasible to put them all in one as I had hoped. Can we go to the next picture? So in photo 3, Castleberry, which is kind of at the top of Conecuh County, it was split in between District 90 and District 92, and I made it complete in District 90. Can we go to the next one? And in photo 4, if you look at District 102, Centronella, Alabama was split, and I wanted it to keep it together, so I put it all in District 65. What were my priorities around this strategy? Like I said previously, just making sure that each each community of interest was preserved. Some of my hurdles, which Felicia spoke about District 32 earlier, was Talladega. I tried my best to fit Talladega in one, but it gets super tricky because the deviation has to be below -5% or +5%. And when you try to put Talladega in one, that deviation does jump to 22%. So I actually had a pretty difficult time trying to get it all in one, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to give up completely. So I actually split it in 2. Another tricky part for me was definitely the Birmingham and Huntsville area, because those have huge population increases. So some of those deviations started at 21%, and I kind of brought them all the way down to 3 or 4. And that is all I have to present. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you to Khadija for her map presentation. So at this time, I think we have one more map presentation. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So we will hear from Tish again from the ACLU for the final map presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. And I am going to try to get this. Can everyone see my map up on the share?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. A couple of things that I want to put forward here, just as far as legal requirements and understandings. I am going to present 3 regions for the state legislature, but I want to give some clarifying information as far as deviations and variances, which everyone has talked about. At the top of this panel, I dropped a link to a few common words used in redistricting, including the words deviation, variance, and dilution. It's important that you keep in mind that when it comes to congressional districts, the law requires close to absolute equality, though the state is allowed very minor deviations, that is, plus or minus a certain number of people, as long as they demonstrate the necessity for those particular deviations. When it comes to the state legislature, as Khadija noted, the law will tolerate a deviation within plus or minus 5% of the mathematical mean to be constitutionally, that is presumptively constitutional. That being said, it is important to find reasonable justifications for the deviations within the legislative maps, and it is key that you meet the very high standard if there are going to be deviations or variances for the congressional maps. And while looking at the maps is an interesting way to consider that information, in actuality, the statistical information is where the sexy lives when it comes to looking at a lot of this information. We focused on the state legislative map, and our strategy was to unpack, that is, to stop the artificial grouping of Black voters at very high percentage levels and bring those percentage levels down so that those districts could still be effective. That is, that the Black voting age population was more likely to be able to elect candidates of choice, whether those candidates were Black or white, rather than having those percentages very high at 60, 70, and 80%. What that means is that across the Black Belt, an area that has a very high percentage of Black residents, we were able to construct our districts in such a way that we more evenly spread Black voting influence across the region, and therefore created more opportunities for Black voters to select candidates of choice. For example, if you'll look here at what we have for Jefferson County, you'll see that we have districts 14 through 60. And I believe that some of these districts were districts that Khadija was speaking about as well. And as you go to the BVAP, the Black voting age population, you'll see that in some instances, the Black voting age population, such as District 15, is currently at 20.58%, and the white voting age population is at 69%. However, when we went in and slightly altered where the district lines were, not even a big alteration, but a more appropriate alteration considering the population in Jefferson County, we were able to create an opportunity district there at 52.49%. Similarly, when we come down and we look at District 55, which is standing at 67.39%, by altering some of how that district is comprised to unpack the voting age population of Black voters and bringing that percentage down to 51%, that qualifies for a VRA styled district where the Black community can elect candidates of choice without necessarily packing substantially more Black voters into that area as possible. And what you see as we look at the map for that jurisdiction is that rather than having us tucked in, and I am trying to find 55, at the center of Birmingham, by altering how we constitute that jurisdiction, we create opportunities around that district for Black voters to have more impact and influence, such that District 54, which was previously slightly below a majority district, becomes another district in which Black voters have a statistically advantageous opportunity to select candidates of choice. Across Jefferson County, what we are looking at here is the effort to more evenly disperse the impact of Black voters such that they are going to be able to be more impactful for their efforts. And I'm getting a note here that District 44 is the other district that becomes effective for Black voting age population to have candidates of choice. Previously, we saw the BVAP at 22.81%, but with the offerings that we have, that district comes up to 53.76%. Similarly, when we turn and start looking at the Senate map for Jefferson County, and I'm sorry not to stay on the maps, but I really think that where we see the impact here is in the statistical analysis. You see here that we first have for District 18, we see that that is an opportunity district at a rate of 47.75%. However, as we alter the lines and where they are placed within Jefferson County, we can get the percentages there up to 50.25%, which would qualify that district for VRA status and create an opportunity for voters to have candidates of choice. The 19th Senate District, which is currently packed at 66.51%, we can reduce the VVAP there so that it is slightly lower, but we know that that is still an effective district for the Black community within those particular lines. It's important here that we keep in mind that these maps reduce county splits in Jefferson County across both the House and Senate from 9 splits to 2. And while part of our strategy was to reduce the number of county splits across these regions that we were interested in, it wasn't our primary goal. Our primary goal was to unpack and to create more opportunities for Black voters within this high minority region to have the opportunity to elect candidates of choice. Similarly, when we look at Montgomery County, we are also going to be trying to unpack the voters in that jurisdiction. For example, as I turn to the statisticals, I don't have the statisticals on that one. But as we look at Montgomery County, we are similarly seeking to have fewer splits across the county while still capturing the opportunity for Black voting age population to select candidates of choice on a wider scale than they otherwise would have. For Jefferson and, slide 7, thank you, sir. For Jefferson and Montgomery County, these efforts are key. When we look here at Montgomery County for the Senate maps, you'll see here that we are currently looking at Senate districts with 32% VVAP, BVAP 68% BVAP, and 21% BVAP. But what we have here is the artificial packing of voters into 26 such that they are less effective in their efforts as it pertains to districts 25 and 30. The proposals that we would put forth would more evenly spread Black voters, minority voters across District 25, such that that becomes an opportunity district, while admittedly slightly reducing the Black population as it pertains to District 30. And at this point, before I move on to my last region, I want to point out that although Black voting age population is a key demographic that we look to here, minority population is a key indicator that we look for here. It's important to consider that in Jefferson County and Montgomery County, we are also potentially looking at more competitive seats because of crossover voting. While voting in the state of Alabama is racially polarized, that is that often Black folks and white folks vote very differently, and sometimes that difference comes down to nothing other than race. That is economic status, social status, educational status are not as indicative of voting behavior as race is. Crossover voting is something that we took into consideration with our maps as we were moving forward as far as the state legislature.
And I hate to interrupt, Tish, but since we're running short on time,
yes.
We do want to get to some of the questions from our viewers.
That's absolutely fine. I am done. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tish. And I do want to remind our viewers, if you have questions, please make sure that you put your questions in the Q&A section here on Zoom. I do see for some of our participants here on Zoom, I see some hands raised. If your hand is raised because you have a question, we are asking that instead of raising your hand, you just go ahead and type your question into the Q&A section at the bottom of the screen. So now we're going to get to some of the questions. And as we go through some of the questions from our viewers, we do want to ask that for our panelists that no more than 1 or 2 of our panelists respond to each question. And we do ask that you keep your responses brief and concise, again, because we are running a little bit short on time, and we know that the evening has been well spent and we've gotten a wealth of information thus far, but we do want to involve our viewers and our participants and give them an opportunity to bring their voices into this conversation by way of getting their questions answered. So our first question from one of our viewers is, are there mapping tools to assist with municipal redistricting? So either of our panelists can take that question, but again, I do ask that you keep your response brief and concise, and that no more than 1 or 2 of our panelists respond to each question. So the question from one of our viewers is, are there mapping tools to assist with municipal redistricting?
Hi, Dr. Mora. Would it be okay if I address that? Yes, there is. I gave a demonstration on how you can actually use days redistricting to actually create a local map within a county or within a city, for example. So that's a free tool that's available. And of course, it would require some investment to obtain a license to one of the other geographic information systems tools such as Maptitude or Esri ArcGIS. But there are also, in addition, other free tools. But yes, it is available.
Thank you, Dr. Farrell Chestnut, for your response. And this next question from one of our viewers, and I guess, Tabitha, this question is more directed to you and to your map. The question is, what role did partisanship play in creating your map? And this, again, this question is for Tabitha Eisner.
Unmute.
Tabitha.
Sorry about that. I had double muted myself to be sure. I was interested in having competitive districts. So in the sense that I was looking for, well, first priority was making sure that there was a majority minority district. Once that was done, I hope to create as many competitive districts as possible. Because we do live in a state that is competitive, that should be competitive. It's 39% Democrat and 49 or 59% Republican. So there should be some competition for seats. So I aimed to create competitive seats.
Thank you for your response, Tabitha. And the next question is, could the LDF maps hold up in litigation if it does not preserve incumbent seats? So again, this is for our presenters from LDF, NAACP Legal Defense Fund. The question is, could your maps hold up in litigation if the maps do not preserve the incumbent seats?
So the requirement, the Voting Rights Act takes precedence over any state preferences as far as redistricting principles, and preserving incumbent seats would be a state preference, but not any kind of requirement that would supersede federal law. So yes, the simple answer is yes. The fact that it doesn't preserve incumbents would not defeat a Voting Rights Act claim.
Thank you so much, Stuart, for your quick and brief response. So the next question, and again, we're going to get through as many of these questions as possible. We do know that this forum was initially scheduled to take place between 6 and 8 p.m. So we're going to get through a few more questions. And for the question that we do not get through in this live forum, we're asking that you follow up with the individual panelists to get your questions answered if we do not get to your question tonight. So the next question is, how do you justify splitting Huntsville into 2 congressional districts? And the viewer said that Huntsville has annexed south of the Tennessee River into Morgan County. Huntsville extends into Morgan and Limestone counties. So how do you justify not putting those 3 counties in the same congressional district? And again, those 3 counties are Morgan, Limestone, and Madison counties. So again, the question is, how do you justify splitting Huntsville into 2 congressional districts? And again, either of our panelists can take that question, but particularly if your community map addressed some sort of split for Huntsville.
I'm happy to defer to others who are actually from Alabama, unlike myself, but I will say just the simplest answer for us was that it's not possible to put all the counties that are above the Tennessee River into a district with Morgan County without exceeding the population size for a district. So you'd have to split one of the other. If you wanted to put all of Morgan County into that district, you'd have to either split or take out one of the other counties above the Tennessee River. So, you could do that. It would just depend on your priorities and how you identify the relevant, important communities. But it would certainly be possible to include all of Morgan County or a different part. We included part of Morgan County in our map in District 5. But you could probably include a different part of Morgan County if there were one that were kind of more part of the Huntsville community.
Thank you. And I think Mike was attempting to answer. So Mike, yes.
And I'll just show you briefly. Yes, in Morgan County, we had the same problem in Jefferson County because the city of Birmingham and the city of Hoover both extend down into Shelby County. So up here, just like Huntsville extends over into Limestone and down into Morgan, the chances of them staying whole without creating another split county, trying to pull in that piece that goes from Huntsville over. But we do have them considered, and we do have them in Morgan County. But Limestone, we were still trying to prioritize whole counties and split as few counties as possible while trying to maintain equal populations or as close to equal populations and keep the deviation as low as possible in those districts.
Thank you to Stuart and to Mike for addressing that question. And another question that we have from a viewer is, are all the maps drawn with the Black population combined with the 2 or more races population combined? So again, the question is, are all the maps drawn with the Black population combined with the 2 or more race population combined?
I'm going to take a crack at trying to answer that. Usually when we're doing the analysis for voting age population, we are looking at the predominant minority population within a particular jurisdiction. And of course, in Alabama, the majority population is white. That is our control group. And then next would be Black voters, who are the largest minority population within the state, and Latinx voters, which are the next largest population. If the question is, are we only looking at the big 3? The answer is yes. If the answer is something different from that, I'm not quite sure how to answer.
I can also take a stab at it. So I think I understood the question to be, are you looking at Black alone, people who only identify Black as their race, or are you including people who identify Black and another race or ethnicity? And for the LDF map, we use Black alone only. So it's only people who put Black and nothing else as their racial identity in the census form.
For our maps, we included folks who identified as Black and folks who identified as Black along with any other racial categorization.
And I'll say for any maps, I believe, I mean, Khadija can say this for sure, but any maps that the Crowd Fellows have drawn are any part Black, which is how we were taught to draw Black majority districts. Out of curiosity, Stuart, and if you don't have time to answer this now, I'm just curious what your stats look like if you change the parameters to any part Black, what the breakdown of the districts are.
They go up a little. The Black population goes up a little, but it's not a ton. It's, you know, maybe half a percentage point.
Okay. Thank you.
And we should also note that we have a not insignificant number of people who put no racial designation. And as I understand, our maps don't categorize those folks at all. We actually drop that population out in its entirety.
So again, thank you. And we do have a question from Facebook, and the question is, where can we see copies of all map proposals? And where can we see copies of all map proposals? And I can just quickly answer that, and then we can move on to another question. So the answer to that question is, where can you see the maps that were presented tonight? The League of Women Voters of Alabama website will have copies or a link to copies of the maps. So you can visit their website to access the maps. So another question that we have from a viewer is, why haven't we been hearing about this from our incumbents? And I assume that this refers to the community mapping process and just the process of going through redistricting and reapportionment. So if we don't have independent commissions and our incumbents are the ones redrawing these lines, so I guess the viewer is concerned about why, as the public, are we not hearing more about the process for redrawing the lines for these maps?
Can I take a stab at that one? And I would say this, for a lot of people in our area, we really pushed the 2020 census. And the census, we let people know the census is what was going to be used to draw those maps coming up. And we had to make sure that once we delivered that message, we went to the communities again to explain to them that you need to be involved in this process. You need to find out what your priorities are. So they needed to meet, and then COVID messed everything up. But we wanted to make sure that we brought that message to the people. Now, a lot of folks, as soon as the census data was going to be announced and dropped, the state went ahead and scheduled their hearings fast, and they had them in 2 weeks. You know, two and a half weeks, they had all of their meetings out of the way. So people missed those. But you still have a chance on your local level if you have not submitted, you know, if they've not submitted their information or anything or testimony to the state, then they still have a chance on the local levels in their counties as well as their municipal levels to come in and make a difference. That's why they need to reach out and get this process started, because a lot of your municipalities won't come around and have elections till 2024. You'll have a couple that'll have it in 2022, but you'll have the majority of them in 2024 and you'll see those if you go through legal municipalities in Jefferson County in Alabama. So we want to make sure that people know that and know that process, know who your elected officials are. And if you have elected officials drawing the map, I don't know how many people would draw themselves out of a job.
I'm going to answer this as well. So there's a few things to note here. One is that I will give you the uncouth answer. If you are an incumbent and you get to draw your own districts, why would you tell anybody? I mean, you have to legally give notice, and the legal notice for the redistricting reapportionment committee, the statewide reapportionment committee, was that they needed to put the announcements of the hearings on the State House monitors. The State House was not open to the public. They made these rules back in May of 2021. They knew very well that the State House was not open. They posted it on their website. If you have ever had the pleasure of playing around with what is termed Allison, or the legislative website, it is incredibly difficult to navigate. The website that they were referring to was in a drop-down menu on the very far right under resources, and then you could find the reapportionment tab. If you didn't know to look there, You wouldn't know it was there. If you did find that website, you would have to know to go through all of the uploaded PDFs to find the schedule. So they also said that they posted it on the Secretary of State website. I have looked for hours. I have never found where in the world it was posted on the Secretary of State website. When the hearing started, it was brought to their attention that nobody could find the website. So they made a new tab on the homepage. But again, this assumes that you know how to navigate to the legislative website to begin with. So there are a lot of barriers. So again, did they do what was legally required to notify people? Yes. Did they do due diligence and actually reaching out to Alabamians? No, because if you're going to redraw these lines and you want to stay in power, I mean, why do you want input? Why do you want people to be involved in the process? It just makes it messier, lengthier. I do also want to point out, before we have more people jump off, that redistricting also happens on the local level. I know Michael kind of touched on this, and I just want to hammer that point home. We've been talking about statewide maps this entire time, but your counties and your municipalities are also redistricting, and they are on their own timelines. So if you are interested in that, please reach out to your city councilor, to your county commissioner, find out where they are in that process, find out if they're planning on holding public hearings, because they are not required to. Find out if they're allowing public comment. When are the meetings? If you thought the statewide maps were being quite obtuse with hearing times, somehow local, it can be worse. If you'd like an example of what your city should be doing, you should check out Huntsville's redistricting website. I am a Birmingham resident, and giving kudos to Huntsville hurts me in my soul. So please understand I'm saying this just because I am giving them kudos. They did do a very good job. They quite literally teach people how to map on their website. I'd say Birmingham has a lot to live up to because they've really set the bar. I'll drop that link in a moment.
Thank you so much, Felicia and Michael, for those answers. And this leads me to another question from a viewer. So this viewer wants to know, is there a conflict of interest for legislators to draw these maps? So what sort of conflicts arise when we have lawmakers drawing these maps? Because we heard Michael mention in his answer to the previous question that no one's going to draw themselves out of a job, right? So I guess, I mean, on the surface, that's probably one of the most obvious conflicts of interest, but are there conflicts of interest?
Well, Dr. Moore, I would say there is a conflict of interest, and it's because the state does not use a commission or a committee to do census redistricting, and I mean census work or redistricting. They don't use a separate commission to do that. And if we did one, how fair would it be if the people that got to appoint were the legislators? They would appoint their friends, or they would appoint people who would draw the districts in their favor. So again, in a state like Alabama, you would still lose out. We have other states out there that draw and then use commissions to redraw their maps, but Alabama is not one of those. And one other thing that I want to make plain to the people listening and watching is that most of the people now that are drawing the maps for 2020 based on the 2020 census were not in office in 2010, so they don't have that experience. So now this is their first time, whether that's on your local level at city council, and I'll tell you in Birmingham, they just had their city council race and they got 7 new city councilors, or 6 new city councilors. So again, those are the people who are going to be drawing the map to keep their job in 4 years. So that's going to be the same thing that's happening on the county commission level. In Jefferson County, we have 3 new county commissioners who were not here the last time out of 5 when they drew the maps. So these 3 new ones, this is their first time drawing a map on the county level, or probably any map. So again, we have to be mindful of the experience of the people, and then ask yourself who all is on the redistricting committees for the state. Those are going to be the folks with the most experience that's sitting on there, or the most connections. So they're taking care of the people, the people who are least experienced and least likely to know what's going on.
And when you have politicians taking point on this, because as Michael noted, not only do they not have experience, let's be real, they're not the ones drawing these maps. I promise you that no state legislator is powering up a copy of MapSheet on their laptop and drawing this. So what you've now done is you've taken the mapping ability, right? And you put it to somebody who's not an elected official, who is not in the public eye, and in many cases, you don't actually know who that person is that is drawing the map. Unless you can get that city to tell you, it's typically a city planner, or some places have contracts with demographers or whoever. So now, instead of having an independent redistricting committee where theoretically you should have had the mapper in the room answering questions or dealing with the public, you've now made it the secret process where politicians are theoretically the ones responsible for this, but they are not the ones driving the process. And just as Michael noted, they are not familiar. They've said many things that make no sense if you have ever done any kind of mapping before, because they don't have the experience of doing it, which is fine. It's okay that they don't. What's not okay is that they're then in charge of it. It just makes this a very difficult process.
And we'll get to one more question before we end for tonight. But before I get to the final question, I do want to make sure that our viewers know that if you missed the public hearings, Alabama Values recorded the public hearings, and the hearings, there will be a link posted in the post-event packet, as well as additional answers to questions that we may not get to tonight. So the post-event packet will include the link for the videos if you missed the public hearings, and there will also be additional answers to other questions. So our final question for tonight is, does the one person, one vote principle refer only to the citizen voting age population? The viewer said, when we were told in the various hearings around the state that there was an ideal population for each unit, was this total population or citizen voting age population? So does the one person, one vote refer only to the citizen voting age population?
I'm the person that has come off of mute to address that one. And while my answer is rooted in constitutional law broadly, I am open to being corrected. Not only is the population calculation not just registered voters, it need not even be only citizens. It is everyone that is counted within the jurisdiction, irrespective of their status. And so when we look at the idea of population for equality across the congressional district, that includes everyone, whether they are of the age to vote, whether they are legally present in the United States, whether they are unhoused, whether they are incarcerated. Representation is as to a broad number of people.
And just to answer the other, I think what is implied implicitly, the other part of the question, CVAP is used for Voting Rights Act compliance assessments. So total population for making districts equal, CVAP for Voting Rights Act compliance.
Again, thank you to Tish and Stuart for their responses. And I do want to make one final announcement. The League of Women Voters of Alabama will make the recording for this forum available on their YouTube channel. And the link to the YouTube channel has been posted in the chat box for those of you who are watching via Zoom. If you're watching via social media, you can just search YouTube for League of Women Voters of Alabama. So again, thank you to everyone for joining this very important conversation. And thank you to all of our panelists for their presentations. We have gained a wealth of information and knowledge about the redistricting process, and we know what to anticipate as we're moving forward in this process here in the state of Alabama. So we thank you all of our panelists, for a very informative and very enlightening discussion and presentations. So at this time, I will turn it back over to Pam Caruso with the League of Women Voters of Alabama to make any final remarks. So again, thank you all for participating, and now Pam will close us out.
All right, Pam, if you want me to, I have had technical difficulties tonight, but this has been, I've been watching on my phone.
Well, go ahead,
I wanted to, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. All right. Thank you, everybody, for sticking in with us. We've been going at this for 2 hours and 20 minutes, which I think it's been really wonderful. This has been an amazing conversation. And thank you to all the presenters. You've just been amazing. We've learned a lot of information, and we've learned more about what it would mean to have fair maps in Alabama, which is something that we all need to strive for. And I'm also really appreciative of all of the participants who stuck with us through this whole presentation. We have had close to 107 people participate, which is a really fantastic turnout. And we are looking forward to continuing on this collaboration and also community engagement as for our second part of our forum, which is we're starting to plan it tomorrow night. And that's getting ready for when the state drops their maps, because the checklist that Evan showed and the things that we've talked about tonight, we are going to basically look at the state's maps when they're available and evaluate them against the same criteria that we've used on our community maps. So this is why we did it. We're building a partnership and a sharing of knowledge, and also just energy to hold Alabama leaders accountable to push for fair maps in Alabama. And I want to thank you all. Just stay tuned. You'll hear more about what we've got planned coming up. And thank you, Dr. Moore, and all the presenters, because this has been a very important event tonight for Alabama.
Thank you,
And
everyone.
Good
night.
Thank you. Good night.